The first thing you have to know is there are a couple of ways of writing a podcast script. A lot of people, what they do when they're starting out is they sort of just hit the record and then they start recording without having, some idea of what they want to do for the whole 20, 25 minutes, the usual length of a podcast. So the first podcast script is the word by word. This is especially useful if you're just starting out, like you don't know any structure about writing a script, you don't know anything. So just the easiest way, just write down everything you want to say in a piece of paper and then recite it and then record it. This is a great way to record your test episode. I don't recommend this for your actual episode that you're publishing, but this is very great to just sort of get a feel of what kind of content you have, what kind of voice and tone you get in a podcast. If you read off a paper, it can feel a little title, alikati त्यो पढेर भाषण दिए जस्तो हुन्छ, but just write down everything you have to say and then record it and see how it feels. The next one is a detailed podcast episode plan. So this is you include all the points you want to talk, like you start from introduction and what you're gonna say, pointers. You don't write the details, you just write the headings, but you write every single heading you want to cover. Intro, what is the duration of the intro, how many jingle music you're going to play, how many duration you're giving for introducing your topic. So you write all that down. This way you will make sure that you will not miss anything while you're recording. And this is a good compromise between writing a full script, like we discussed earlier, and not having anything at all. Don't feel comfortable writing completely what you're going to record. Just write your headings in details. And instead of not having anything at all, this is a very good way for writing a podcast script. The next one, and probably the most popular one used by all the podcasters, is a bullet point. What you do here is just write the headings. You like intro, you like introduction music, you like, what are you going to say and how many headings, and then conclusion. So this is more like the most used format, because what it does is it gives your podcast some structure, how you begin, how you develop, and how you end. Also, while doing this, you have to keep a note that you write sequentially, like exactly the way you will be recording in your podcast. So start from the beginning and end at the end while writing this kind of script. So, instead of writing for the whole 20 minutes, you can plan for writing just for the first minute and then see how it goes, record it, and then you can build it from there. Write for another couple of minutes then, and then build it up slowly, because usually it's a very daunting to write for the whole 20 minutes on your first try. It goes without saying that podcast, it's sort of a conversational medium. So you're having a conversation with your listeners instead of you just giving out information. So write a script like you're talking to someone, and also incorporate your personality into it. Like if you're a funny person, crack some jokes in the middle. And also what a lot of people try to do is they try to write in a very standard quote unquote language. Like, if you are from Western Nepal, Pokhara, Parbat, you have a certain lingo of Nepali. And so don't hesitate to use it. That will give a distinct personality to your podcast. Bring a little of yourself into your script. Welcome to Aditya's podcast. This is your host, Aditya. I'm from this, and this is the podcast about this. And after that, you can switch to thank you for listening. Hope you're well. Talk a little bit to your listeners so that, you can build a rapport. And the next, introduce your episode. So what are you going to talk about? And if you have any sponsors, lucky you. So give out their message or play out their music. And then if you have a guest, introduce your guest. At the end, don't forget to thank your listeners and, ask them to comment. And the last bit is a bit that a lot of people miss in podcasts. It's called call to action. So if you're doing, the call to action is basically you tell your listeners to go and do something like, don't forget to subscribe. We are in Apple Podcast, or we're in Google Podcast, or we're in Spotify. We follow our Facebook page, and this is our Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter or Instagram. So tell them to do something at the end of a podcast so that you can build a follower, a community around you. Make sure you have a middle, a beginning, and an end, like a story. So the way to do it, the opening has to capture attention. A lot of listeners drop out in first couple of minutes. To ensure that doesn't happen, put out some interesting bits of your podcast in the beginning and then start from there. Introduce the topic of the episode up front and also sell the benefits, like what are you going to learn from this particular episode. That gives the listeners an idea of whether to stay or whether to leave or whether it had something beneficial for them. And the body of the episode is obviously where you sort of give everything you promised in the beginning. So make sure you have 3 to 5 sort of segments depending on the length of your episode, and make sure you keep transitions. Like first we're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about this, and then if you're doing a cause and effect sort of discussion, this this is the cause of this issue, and so these are the solutions. So make a sort of nice flow about the body of your podcast. And at the end, a lot of people don't tend to do that, and it also depends on what kind of podcast you're running. Try and give a little recap of what you've covered, so that even if someone misses, generally people listen to podcasts when they're commuting, or when they're cooking, and they might miss few things and they might not go back. So make sure to recap the major points of the podcast at the end. Write like you talk. And the first very basic skill is use contractions, like that sentence there, if that's how you normally speak. Also, be very plain spoken, like you speak to your friends in real life. You don't have to be very formal. Don't use very formal English or Nepali or Hindi or whatever podcast languages you're writing a podcast in. Sorry. And also very important, if you're doing something sort of slightly technical or slightly academic podcast, make sure you sort out the jargons. So jargons are basically technical words that only specialized people know. Try to avoid that as much as possible. Use short sentences. What a lot of people do is they use very long sentences and they seem to trail off in the middle. Write complete sentences, but short, and keep one idea in each sentence if you can. While you're writing, make sure you finish off your sentences while recording also. If you write complete sentences in your script, while you're saying it, you have more freedom to, sort of expand on it and say a couple of more sentences. And if you have a complete sentence in your script, and after you say that, if you trail off in another sentence, you still have a sort of complete sentence you can use in your edit. Two, this is a very basic format. You can write the duration in the bracket as well, a tentative duration of how long your intro will be, so that you have an idea of how many time each section is consuming. If you want to break it down a little more, it's like writing an essay, but in a more conversational tone. So yeah, write your main points, support your main point. If you have data and references, give it after you mention your main points. Support it with anecdotes or case studies or example. This is another type of template you can use. The Castos is also a podcast platform where you can host and create a podcast. This Most Live 365 has a huge resource of everything from how to start, what kind of mics you need to use and everything. And the podcast host is another platform you can use. NPR.org is a non-profit organization from the US, I believe. They produce a lot of hundreds of podcasts, and they are big resource in their website. And the last resource is me, of course. If you have anything, drop an email. And if you want to start a podcast and don't know how to go about it, I'll be very, very happy to help. The best mic is the one you have. Don't worry about it. Don't go. There's a little very cheap, what they call a clip mic that you can clip on your sort of short t-shirt collars. It's available in 300-400 rupees, Nepali rupees, the cheapest ones. So you can start off with that. If not, you can record with your normal phone, headphones and earphones, and you can walk it out on the edit. So if you want to buy a sort of decent, if you have money to do it, there's a mic called BM300. That's what a lot of podcasters use in the beginning. It costs about 3,500 rupees. But don't worry about it. Like I said, the best mic is the one you have. Editing, if you want to use a free software, it's called Adobe Audition. You can use it. It's open source. It's a very good way to start editing a podcast. In Nepal, I guess you can pirate an Adobe Audition, Audacity, which is a free recording software. Diversity. I think that's the biggest thing that's missing out there. A lot of podcasts tend to be this, middle class, city dwelling, Nepali or English speaking people. So, there's a lot of audience out there. There are a lot of stories out there. If you go out and find that you can tell that no one else is telling. Look into your neighborhood. If you are from Bhaktapur, there are a lot of, Nepali is a very rich culture. You can pick up something from there, and you can start a podcast. It doesn't have to be Nepali or English. There are a lot of Hindi speaking people in Nepal. We don't have a podcast in a native language, mother tongue, except for Nepali right now in Nepal, as far as I know. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram for a podcast. It's free. If you can, sort of afford it, buy a website for a podcast and make a website for a podcast. If not, you can submit it in Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And there are a lot of other, these are the three main platforms. So it's free to submit. If you submit it, Google will, I think, list your podcast in 3 to 5 days. So then it's accessible to the whole world. But if you don't have that, you can host it on SoundCloud as well. So if you're looking for free hosting options, I think there's going to be a lot of podcasts in the next 1 year because we're just starting out. I already know at least 8 to 10 creators who are just sort of starting to make their podcast. So we'll have a lot of podcasts. We'll have a lot of crowded space. But if you start now, you'll be sort of ahead side of the crowd. And I hope we'll have a diverse content. We get to hear stories that, because podcast is such a democratic medium, like anyone can pick up a phone, can start a podcast. So we hope to, get a sort of stories and narratives that we have not been getting in the traditional media. I'm very hopeful that a lot of good things are coming.